Hello friends, Rob Caskie, proudly telling stories. Today I have one of my favourite people in the world joining me on our little show, Mary Carlisle, who's been in the Midlands for a long time, a very distinguished member of this community. Behind me you can see the rain gently falling, which we are so grateful here in the Midlands. I know much of the country is praying for rain. You might be able to hear in the corner the quiet little chatter of Mary's pet budgie, which is named Zach, because Mary says Zach provides her with her daily Prozac, hence the name. It's just fantastic. Now Mary, please, my viewers are going to love to hear something from you. Tell us about your move with Avison and a young family all those years ago to the Midlands, and why the Midlands is so special to you, not having been raised here.
Well, Rob, it goes back to 1981. The eldest of our 4 children was 9. And we lived in Johannesburg. I'd lived in one suburb in Johannesburg all my life. Avison, my husband, grew up in northern Rhodesia in Zambia. And we got married and went back to live in the suburb in which my parents had lived. So I'd never lived in any other place than in Observatory, Johannesburg. And we had spoken about it a lot because we'd been down to the Eastern Cape to Avison's family who lived in Dordrecht. And every time we came back from the farm, we said, what are we doing bringing our children up in a city? They need more than city life can offer. And when Christy was 9, we said, we've got to get out of here. So we put the 4 children and our suitcases in a motor car, and we came down to the Midlands. It was the best move that we could have ever made. We knew not a single soul here. We bought a small holding just outside Hope, and we arrived, and our neighbour who had a farm called us in the most deprecating terms, plotties, which is exactly what we were, because Avison worked at Umgani Water, and we just moved onto this farm, bought ourselves 2 dairy cows, did not have a cat's idea of what to do with them, except to chase them around the garden to try and milk them. The children wanted chickens and horses and all the things that you have on the farm. So it was a slow and very interesting process.
It reminds me of a show that has garnered many laughs and amusement in England, of Jeremy Clarkson of Top Gear fame buying a farm. It's too funny for words. So these plotties, these folks who move onto these small holdings, they really are a source of much amusement for those around them. Because you've already heard about the dairy cows, and of course the children wanted chickens. So there are 2 fantastic chicken stories involved that nobody can tell quite like Mary. And the first is about the bantams from the reeds. Please tell my listeners about that story, Mary.
Well, it taught me a lot about the Midlands, and actually taught me a lot about chickens. Because the children had nagged and nagged and nagged. They knew nobody, they had no friends. So, because we didn't know anybody, so they said, well, then they'd like some chickens. We had got a couple of dogs, but they really wanted some chickens. So I sort of asked around in the shops and said, does anybody know where we can find some chickens? And somebody said, oh yes, Mrs. Reed, who lives in Maryvale, which is just outside Hope, she has got a whole lot of bantams that she wants to get rid of. So if you go and visit her, and it told me exactly how to get there, I'm sure she'll give you some bantams. So I loaded the 4 children into the motor car, and off we set to go and find Mrs. Reed. Well, eventually we found her, and I introduced myself and said, I've come to get some bantams, will it be all right? Mrs. Reed said, yes, you're welcome to the bantam. But you and these children, all of them, have to catch them. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to catch bantam chicks. They're not easy, not because the chicks are bad, but the mothers are very vicious. They don't like you taking their babies away. So we then looked for them, and they were all under the bushes, and we tried to get the bantams. Mrs. Reed watched this whole performance. The children in the bushes knew out, the chickens going every time we caught a baby. But eventually we got enough of these chickens for the children. And I had thought of taking a box, and we put them in the box. And Mrs. Reed said, do you know what you have to feed them? So I said, no, well, not really, Mrs. Reed. Now, Mrs. Reed came from a very well-established Midlands family. They had a farm up Nottingham Road, her and her husband and her 3 children. And they clearly knew what they were talking about. She did. So she said, well, you must go to the farmers' exchange and you must get some crush. Do you know what crush is? Well, not really. Well, it's mealies that are crushed. Okay, I can do that. So she said, you must go and you must speak to Nookie and Pie and tell them that you've got some chickens, babies, chicks, and that you need some crush. So she said, do you know where the farmers' exchange is? I said, yes, I do know where that is because I've actually been there a couple of times, so I know where that is. So she said, well, go and speak to Nookie and Pie. So I'm loading the chickens into the thing and the children, get in, close the door. And I said to her, you know, Mrs. Reed, this is a very strange thing for me. I come from Johannesburg. And I said, you know, I'm sure that these people that you called Nookie and Pie have probably got very, very reasonable names. And I said, but why, if you called your children a nice name, why would you, do you think they were christened Nookie and Pie? So she said, no, not at all. They were christened Priscilla and Barbara. So I said, oh, so do you know them? She said, well, actually, they're my daughters.
You know, Mary, that is a quite priceless story. Because I wonder how many people in Hyde know their proper names. We all know them as Nookie and Pie.
Well, it taught me. Firstly, it taught me about catching chickens.
Right.
And that was a lesson. But it also taught me in the Midlands, you say nothing about anybody because they all related. So it was a very hard lesson, and I learned it very quickly.
That's wonderful. For those of you interested, Nookie Joyce was part of my introduction to David Rattray all those years ago to go and work on the Anglo-Zulu War battlefields. But Mary, it goes further than that. Weren't you trying to get some laying chickens that you wanted for laying eggs on your small holding, and you were directed to someone south of Maritzburg, Ashburton, Caddo Ridge, that area? Tell us about that in Everson, and you're trying to bring these chickens home in your vehicle.
Robert, I don't know why I'm telling you this story, because actually it's against myself. And only stupid people tell stories against themselves, but I'll tell you because it's very funny. Yes, we want to get these point-of-laid chickens that are 21 weeks, as you know. And they were very difficult to get because it means that you don't have to rear the chicks, you just buy the fowls as they're about to lay. And so I'd seen an advert in the Natal Witness that there were these chickens for sale at Ashburton, which is south of Pietermaritzburg, as you said, about 20 k's south of Pietermaritzburg. So I phoned the chap up and said, have you got some point-of-lays? Yes, he said, he's got some point-of-lays. And but we must come today and collect them because a lot of people want them. So I fetched two of the children from school. We had a double cab thing. So two of the children sat in the back of the double cab. I fetched Addison from Anglo-Zulu War in Pietermaritzburg, and we went to Ashburton. And it was very exciting because now we were going to be real farms, not lotties anymore, because our chickens were going to lay eggs to lay and chickens to hatch. So we eventually find this man's place, and it's right out sort of in the sticks there. And he says, did you come with a box for these chickens? No. I said, it'll be fine. We've got a tarpaulin to put over the back of the cab. So he looked a bit askance. He said, how many do you want? So I said, 22. So you know, I catch chickens upside down by their legs, chuck them in the back of the bucky, go back for the next one until we got 22. There was a heck of a noise coming from the back of the bucky. But we put the tarpaulin over, and you know the bucky's got those hooks on it. Hook the tarpaulin onto the bucky, and he said, nee wat, dit sal nie werk nie. No, it will, said I. He said, nee dame, dit sal nie werk nie. So I said, well, what else do we need? He said, you need some rope. You need some rope to tie the tarpaulin on. So I said, well, I didn't bring any rope. So he said, but there's a store around that's run by Indian people. They'll have it. So the children are in this double cab park. The chickens that are making a hell of a racket on the back, and we drive down the road, and sure enough, there's the store. I go and I say, have you got any rope? So the Indian man very kindly says, no, he hasn't got any rope, madam, but he has got some string, a ball of twine. I said, perfect. by the ball of twine, and now it's about 5:15, and now we've got to tie the tarpaulin on. So Alison gets out, and we've got the twine, and I throw the twine over the top of the bucky, and he throws it underneath, and I fiddle it over the top, and we wind the twine all the way around this tarpaulin to keep the chickens in the thing and the tarpaulin on top of it. So we look like a trussed-up chicken because the twine went in front of the windscreen and it went across the
as only proper farmers would.
can do. Yeah. So we set off and we just go through Ashford and we get onto the highway, the N3, the main road that goes from Johannesburg to Durban, and we're onto this highway. And we're going along very nicely until we hear ping, ping, ping. Look out the back of the window, and there's string twine flying everywhere. And the wind is working its way underneath the tarpaulin, and I can see that this is now, we're in serious trouble. So Everson stops on the side of the highway, the cars are going jump, 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 jump past us like that, and we get out and we say, okay, so what to do now? I don't know what to do. I mean, we haven't got any more string, and the 22 chickens in the back and 2 children with us, what are we going to do? There's only one thing for it. Alison said, I'm going to have to get in the back of this bucky with the 22 chickens, and you're going to have to drive home. Well, he drew the short straw. I was lucky, because I got behind the steering wheel, and Alison climbed into the back of the bucky to hold on to the tarpaulin so that we could get the 22 chickens home to lay the eggs, because we're now real farmers. So we set off, and we're going down that Polly Shorts road, up the other side, and I say to the 2 children, turn around and wave to Dad, because I think he's probably quite lonely in the back of the car there. He's got 22 chickens in the back of it. So Duncan turns around and he looks, and I say, wave to Dad, Duncan, wave. So he says, Mom, I don't think I can wave at Dad. Why not? He said, because I think Dad's very cross. So I said, no, he's not a bit cross. He's loving it. He's in the back with 22 chickens that are going to lay eggs, and we're going, he'll be fine. Wave at Dad. So he said, Mom, Dad is shaking his fist. He's very cross. And he says, you must stop. I said, I can't stop now because of all the traffic. So I go on about 500 meters more, and I stop and pull off the road. As I stop, the sound of the chickens was deafening, but the sound of Alison shouting just superseded the sound of the chickens. Because he said, what on earth do you think it would do? I said, but it was going fine. He said it wasn't. I was like Mary Poppins. I was hanging on to the tarpaulin, and the tarpaulin was lifting him off as he was sitting in the back of the bucky. The tarpaulin was lifting him. So stop again. What are we going to do? There's only one thing for it. We loaded 22 chickens into the front of the motor car with us. So we had 22 chickens, 2 children, Alison and me. A very, very bad mood between the 2 of us. He was not going to speak to me because I nearly blew him up into the sky. And we drove home about 30 kilometers with 22 chickens that sat on our shoulders, sat on my head, sat on my knees, sat on the children. And if you've ever been in an enclosed place with 22 chickens, you know what a mess they made. It took us a long time to get over that.
Get over that and clean the bucky.
Yes.
Well, I tell you, Mary, I don't know if Zach's heard that story before, your lovely budgie, but even he is noting his amusement and his agreement that it's a great story. Now, Mary, please, tell us a little bit about this wonderful, wonderful group, the Midlands Forum, that you've been involved with all the way along, how it started, where it is today, how you've kept going through lockdown without live presentations. It really is a very notable achievement.
Well, Rob, Midlands Forum was started in 1981, so it's 40 years old this year, by a very intrepid woman called Sybil Fielding, who lived in Hyde, and she decided that in those days women didn't work. Everybody was really stay-at-home mothers. And she decided that the women needed some kind of stimulation. She had access to lectures at university, So once a month, we met in the little hall in the middle of Howick called the Saris Hall, which was built by the South African Women's Auxiliary in the middle of Howick. It's also a remarkable story. And we met there on the first Tuesday of the month, but we were confined by space. So it only took about 110 people. So, for instance, when I came to Howick in 1981, I had to wait 3 years for people to either leave or die before I could become a member of Midlands Forum. And there were very strict rules instituted by Sybil Fielding. If you didn't attend 6 meetings in a year, you were out. If you brought your knitting, you were out. If you spoke, you were out. You just got crossed off the list for misdemeanors. If you didn't, if you left early, that was a cardinal sin. I mean, that was it. You just got your marching orders and somebody else took your place. But she built up a reputation. And Richard Steyn, who you know, was one of the first people to speak. Clem Santa was early on. Kurt von Schoending, who worked for the United Nations, was a South African representative, I think, of herself at the United Nations spoke. And so she had this list of people that she had access to. So that was where it started.
And Mary, I mean, I have attended so many of these Midlands Forums meetings with great, great pleasure. And I love your greeting where you say, good morning, lots of grey hair over lots of grey matter. Because here in Howick, it's become the retirement centre of South Africa. There are a huge number of retired people in Howick who generally were advanced in their careers or captains of their industries. And as Mary says, the intellectual horsepower here in Howick is enormous. And the meetings are now held in the high school hall and very often will have 500 people, men including these days, because the rules have softened a bit since Sybil Fielding's early days. And it is the most notable achievement. Mary heads it up. And through lockdown, where we can't have live presentations, Mary has been able to get speakers to speak online for the Midlands Forum. And all the grannies come on and the grandpas, and they sit 4 and 6 up at a computer and watch these wonderful presentations. It's the most incredible story.
Yes, but here now, I must also add that when we first started this a year ago to do the Zoom, because a lot of organisations like this have now closed down. Sadly, the one in Durban, which has been going for longer than Midlands Forum, they're not carrying on because they've still got their members, but they decided they can't do Zoom. I have to mention that without people like you, it would never, ever, we wouldn't have been able to go on. To get people onto Zoom, I thought was going to be a mountain that we would never climb. But being able to offer our members, 500 of them, an alternative to not having Midlands Forum, they all said, well, I'm not sure we can do it. It didn't take very long for 500 people to grasp the nettle, and yes, it took a little bit of teaching. But you know, it has empowered people. They can now speak to their children overseas. And from that point alone, it's been a wonderful, wonderful step for them here to be able to meet and to have the standard. In fact, in some instances, even better people to speak, because we can tap into anything, into people anywhere, and we have. And so that's been a very heartwarming extension to Midlands Forum. And it's also taught me that, you know, you've got to look on the bright side of life. You can't just stop when the road ends. You've got to find a way forward. And this is exactly what happened with it. So yes, we're going strong. We've had a couple of funny things that I'm sure you know the story about. We had an instance just before lockdown where one of our speakers blew in the Howick High School hall, one of our big speakers. And we didn't really know what to do about it because this side of the hall wasn't going to get any sound, and people complain desperately if they can't hear, understandably. But we left the speaker there because we thought if the speaker's there, they'll think it works. So we carried on with just the one speaker, and nobody complained. The part from China was going to take 6 weeks to come, so on a ship, and slow boats, and it didn't arrive for the next meeting. And so we did the same thing. We said, we'll just keep the speaker there, we'll fool them. This side of the hall will never know that there's no speaker. Except that halfway through, well not, about 10 minutes into it, I heard somebody at the end of that row muttering and mumbling, and she got up and moved a seat, got up and mumbling, moved a seat, and eventually she got next to somebody, and she said, the woman said, what's the matter with you? Why do you keep moving? And she said, because I can't hear. So the person, now the poor speaker, luckily it wasn't you, the poor speaker's now trying to do his speech, and the woman who she sat next to wrote it and said, you can't hear because our speaker has blown. With which the woman who couldn't hear took one look at him and said, well, he looks all right to me.
I'm glad it wasn't me,
I know
Mary.
it wasn't.
That is a wonderful story. Well, folks, I want to tell you that Hike is full of these rare gems. No one equals Mary Carlisle in terms of her contribution to this community, her wonderful 4 children and their contributions respectively in various areas. And I want to thank you, Mary, from the bottom of my heart for gracing us with your presence today, your glorious presence and your wonderful stories. I know my listeners and readers and watchers are going to enjoy that very much.
Yes, but let me just add that not only do you do this kind of work and speak to people in far-flung places, but the energy that you and Karen add to this community also keeps everybody here afloat and laughing and being able to listen to the most wonderful stories. So from us to you two, my thanks.
Oh, Mary, you're very gracious. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed that, folks. I said at the start I was sure you would, and I have absolutely no doubt that this is going to be one of the very popular Patreon stories. God bless you, Mary.